presents Scratch a Track,
the podcast where we debate which track to scratch off some of the most known and unknown albums of all time.
We live in an era of singles.
This is an album.
People no longer listen to an album for the work it truly is.
It kind of defines a band.
It's just not something that people relate to nowadays.
We've all gotten the dreaded.
It started out as a game.
Which track on the album would you scratch out if you had to? Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Scratch a Track presented by the Dude and Grim Show. I'm the Dude. He is Grim in Michigan. What up, Grim?
What's up, dude?
All right.
It's a fine afternoon.
That's right. A little Injustice for All, take two.
Yeah.
All microphones
we didn't
are
quite get the
right
justice that it deserved the first time.
No.
Had a little mic issue. Stemming from
maybe you want to explain that a little further for some of our fans out there.
Dude, we were having a recording session to finish the More album, and in doing so, there's a big vocal mic behind me, and that I placed in the input that I normally have my recording mic here in for the show. And so it was interesting. I just had to turn it up a little bit and everything was still coming through. But then come to find out when I was about to put them together that it sounded like we should have done the Lonesome Crowded West that way, because it was like Isaac Brock kind of yelling the vocals from
I was
across
going to say, dude,
the room.
Isaac Brock, dude, he must have been like, dude, hell yeah, you guys should do every episode like that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody else would feel that way, but
Well, no, and especially as we'll get into with some of the recording techniques used in Injustice for All, they specifically went with the close mics, so I'm sure we'll get into that. Yeah,
we will definitely get into it. So
giving it the correct justice it deserves this time around.
It's like the Redux, sort of.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't even know what you call it. We'll just call it take two. So, and we have to redo the next episode as well. So
yeah.
But anyways, moving on. So, just in case, all the people out there who thought everything we did was perfect. We're not perfect. Okay. We don't know everything.
No.
We're far from it. Okay. And the more you listen, the more you watch, the more you will realize that. So
yeah, still having equipment issues.
Exactly. So anyways, Injustice for All, Metallica, metal. This is our first kind of really venture into that territory.
Yeah.
I mean, we've done like with Mr. Bungle, that has some it's a little weirder, harder album in parts and stuff like that. But this is definitely probably the most consistent in what you would call in the metal genre.
Oh, a true heavy metal album for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely. So this, so this came out. This is now their fourth studio album, and I believe it's the one that came out. At least the one that I was always most familiar with for me growing up was, I guess, what people refer to as the Black Album. But I believe it's just a self-titled album, isn't it? Okay. So this is the album that I guess came out right before that, or a few years before that, and it was their fourth studio album. And we will definitely get into the bass controversy. But this is the first one that had Jason Newsted as their bass player. Because Cliff Burton's life was tragically cut short in a bus accident while they were on tour. And I remember you saying last time that's typically not how you hear about musicians passing away. Especially,
no, you'd expect that it was, some sort of drug related overdose. But as I mentioned, Metallica isn't typically noted for being a heavily drug using band. I mean, if you go back to the last album that Burton was on, which was Master of Puppets, the song Master of Puppets is actually about addiction. I think specifically to cocaine, but it's about addiction.
It's a hell of a drug.
The kind of grip that it has on people. So yeah, that was too bad. And I mean, with him dying in that bus accident, this was a real turning point, I would say, for the band. It was kind of a make or break scenario because they have to go out on a limb. They have to replace the bass player if they intend to keep going on.
Right.
And that also is an interesting story, dude. I don't know if we touched on this before, but what I've read is that a gentleman by the name of Les Claypool, who people know as the bassist from Primus, an awesome bassist, but not in any way stylistically congruent to Metallica, actually auditioned for Metallica, and I think his style was maybe a little too much for them.
Yeah, was he too good, or just didn't fit in necessarily? Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Not to say that they wouldn't want somebody good, but yeah, his bass playing is in a way too good.
Yeah, well, and I think that goes to say, with a lot of bands too, is it's not always about playing the best notes, the best solos, the best this. It's about when you're playing together. It's and you've been in bands too, about playing the right notes. And all meshing and fitting. If everybody's just doing just a badass solo, hey, jam bands and stuff like that, everybody gets their turn. That's if you're into that sort of thing. But that's, even though Metallica has a lot of longer songs on this, and you could probably consider some of them sort of jams, not necessarily in that vein. Yeah,
that's never what they were kind of going for. I think it's safe to say.
Right. So and this, like you said, it was definitely a turning point in the band. I mean, they had a new, a new bassist. This is also the first album where they actually put out a video, which was one. They'd kind of stayed away from that in the past. And they were also nominated for a Grammy for Best Hard Rock and Metal Performance, and controversially lost to Jethro Tull.
And I cannot understand that, because Jethro Tull is an awesome band and will no doubt be on this show probably sooner than later. But I would have never in my life classified them as metal.
Yeah, and it would be really interesting to go back, I guess, that year and look through kind of the Grammy nominations and see kind of how certain bands and artists were kind of divvied out, and see who else would have been nominated in the rock metal performance, other than Metallica and Jethro Tull, because I certainly wouldn't put them in the same kind of, area, or genre necessarily. Yeah.
Now, one thing I would want to touch on too, I guess we can, because they kind of went into MTV, which was an area that they hadn't gone into before. The video, for one, I remember watching as a younger kid, and it was like shockingly disturbing, but also awesome. I mean, really good. And what is there? There's a movie.
Johnny Got His Gun.
Johnny Got His Gun, that they took clips from, and I believe at least the song is supposed to portray a World War I soldier who gets his arms and legs blown off by a landmine. And when he's in the hospital, the only way he can communicate, I think, is by like banging his head or making some sort of noise in Morse code that is basically begging them to kill him. And it's really, it's a dark video, but it is worth watching, and it's really intense and awesome.
Yeah, I did a little research on that movie, and when it's like considered an anti-war film. Came out in 1971, and when it came out, it wasn't overly successful, although it did have Donald Sutherland's in it, who's obviously a known actor. But then the other guy, and I think you may know this since I mentioned it before, but so Timothy Bottoms, who is Sam Bottoms, I believe his younger brother. Sam Bottoms plays Lance in Apocalypse Now, who is like the surfer dude and everything. It's just one
cool. Of the best characters ever. Yeah.
Pretty much, he's like, oh yeah, that last tab of acid I was saving. Yeah, I dropped it. Yeah. I would definitely, if I was in the Dolong Bridge, that's definitely where I would drop acid. Yeah. That seems like a really good idea, Lance.
Pretty unforgettable trip.
Very, very. I think he lost the dog in that scene too. No wonder. So, yeah. Anyways, I digress. But yeah, it is. So scenes of that movie are kind of interspliced with them in basically kind of how a lot of music videos have been done. Like the band in a warehouse, like playing, and it's kind of
Live,
black and white
basically.
and dark live. Yeah. And it's cool. And it's funny. After watching the video, I hadn't seen it for a long time. It was so interesting. I was like, God, they look so young, which made me feel really, really old too. But it was like, wow, pretty cool. So yeah, that was their first kind of video, and I'm not really sure what their hesitation was maybe before, or maybe they didn't feel like they had a song worthy enough, or they didn't want to kind of give into that the scene, or didn't want to be
I don't know. I really don't know, because I don't remember a lot of like metal bands being on there. Of course there was the heavy like hair band shit from that time, but
they were not that.
No, they were not Metallica. They didn't have the depth nor the maybe some of them had the musicianship, but to me it pretty much all sucked.
Yeah.
But sorry.
Great, we just lost 5 subscribers. We went from 20 to 15. Damn it.
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah. Well, and then, their next album that comes out, I think they had at least 2 or 3, because Unforgiven, Enter Sandman,
Nothing Else Matters.
Nothing Else Matters probably all had videos. So they really went into it. But the world was changing at that point. But it kind of was from a music perspective, because not that hair bands weren't there, but they kind of started taking on this more intense, darker tone, because Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction had just come out. And then you had, we had this album, and then you get the Use Your Illusions and the Metallica, the self-titled album. And
by the time the Black Album was coming out, you were starting to see a transition away from hair metal and getting more into grunge. But they could be consistent with what they did because it didn't fit into any of that stuff. I mean, there was always underground metal, probably heavier, a lot of it than Metallica, but they like somehow reached this mainstream because theirs was palatable enough, I think, for a wider mainstream audience than, say, a band like Cannibal Corpse, who, that's really kind of fringe.
Yeah, is Greg here?
He is. So
I read those lyrics the other day. It's some intense stuff. Anyways, that's an album for a later date for sure.
Yeah.
But
I had to throw that in.
Yeah, I know. I was waiting for that too. So but speaking of kind of Guns N' Roses, when Metallica was looking for a producer, I think the producer that they had worked with previously was a Fleming Rasmussen. Is that he worked on their previous albums, right?
Yeah, with the exception of Kill 'Em All, I believe he did Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets, which had a very, I don't want to say consistent sound, but if you listen to both those albums, it probably wouldn't surprise you to hear that they were produced by the same guy. I mean, they sound awesome and like metal in its purest form, but yeah.
Sure. Well, I guess he wasn't initially available for this album, so they went and hired Mike Klink, who had just gotten done producing Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction, and they kind of started working with him. I think they even started doing some recording, and I don't think the band was really feeling it. They, from what I'm seeing here, and you can probably speak to this a little more, but they and maybe this is what they did with Fleming Rasmussen, or I'm not sure if they did this with Mike Klink, but they started recording the instruments kind of separately, and they used 3 reels. So they did like the drums on one reel, bass and guitars on another, and then a third reel for other parts. I'm not really sure. I don't understand.
I think that's what they did for the recordings that they did with Rasmussen. I don't remember reading a whole lot about what they did with Mike Klink, but I do like the bit about that Rasmussen was on the plane from Europe over, and he listened to what they had done, probably in a Walkman, honestly, at that point. Listened to what they had done with Mike Klink, and basically as soon as he was arrived, like, Klink was fired, and then they started going with him, with Rasmussen. But it was interesting you talk about those 3 reels. So the album was then obviously done on tape, and in order to get, I don't know what system they were using, or if these were machines that could be like master slave together where they were always in sync. But that's a lot of tracks, and that makes for a really complex recording session. So you can imagine how many tracks, were used on this thing, because I think they said they had one reel just for drums. And you watch the one video, you'll notice Ulrich's drum set has like two bass drum, two kick drums. I mean, it's huge. You can only imagine how many mics were on that thing, to get that sound. And then the guitars too, because we'll get into the bass in a minute, but let's just say that the guitars really made up the meat and potatoes of that sound, because they didn't really allow the bass to get the justice it deserved.
Dude. And that's what you're going to find. Just us.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And that's, for me, having not listened to a whole lot of metal, that's one thing that really, really stands out, is the drums and the guitar, just the way they it's constantly just driving and driving and driving, like constantly moving forward. And they get in, a lot of times they'll get into a rhythm together and they'll kind of mimic each other, and then they'll kind of break apart. And I just found it interesting, and I'm sure every band's different, and I don't know a ton about metal, but I was really surprised that there was a lot of transitions and changes. During a lot of these songs. I mean, you would want that if the song Injustice for All, for instance, is 9 minutes and 46 seconds. It's almost a 10-minute song. And it's really cool that there's a lot of just transitions and things. They're
different
not always,
parts.
Yeah. In some of the songs, I noticed that the transitions are a little harsher. They're not always maybe the smoothest, but since it is kind of metal and just the sound is harsher, you kind of forgive it. It can get away with it. But there's also some real melodic sections. And one thing and maybe you could speak to it a little more. I remember last time you said how there is a kind of a correlation almost between metal and sort of, I guess, classical music, right?
Yeah, I would say that, because a lot of other rock music is somehow related to or based in the blues. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And because of that, there's kind of this, people tend to go toward like the pentatonic or blues scale, as people call it. But with this stuff, it's more pure. You're talking more like more modes and pure minor scales, and just the way they play it, it's like very symmetrical. Like classical music was really big on symmetry. Sure. And it's technically they're very proficient. There is kind of a lot of similarities to it, about think about it in movements, like what you were talking about. Like there'll be a fast movement and then a slow movement, and then
gotcha.
So there is a lot of similarities to it.
Yeah. Well, for me, one thing I noticed just listening to it, and this is, again, maybe different than kind of the classical, but a similarity that I kind of found was almost like kind of trance or electronic music, where it kind of gets that beat and gets that groove, and it kind of goes and it continues with it. Now, if you listen to one and listen to the other, they don't sound very similar, but I felt like the sound with that definitely, for me, I noticed similarities. Like one of the other bands we did was LCD Sound System, and just the way it kind of gets in that groove, and it goes and it goes and it goes. And sometimes when I was listening to the album, it very much, especially because some of the songs were longer, it kind of seemed like things were one to me. Like I could get lost. I'm like, wait, what song am I in now?
Yeah, I can see that.
Where am I a little bit?
Definitely see that. Mm-hmm.
So it just kind of had that.
That's an interesting parallel that I never really thought about. But you're right. I mean, the riff becomes the groove, right? And it's just a similar concept, but just a different feeling, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, kind of maybe going back to the recording, if you want to get into to sort of the bass controversy.
Kind of have to.
It's interesting. Newstead said that he had a difficult time during these recording sessions, because he said the band basically, they didn't really discuss things with him, and they weren't even there when he put his parts in. It was like he recorded separately with an assistant engineer. And to me, that's so weird. It's like, hey, welcome to the band. We did what we're going to do. We're going to take off here. You can, hang out with the assistant and put in the parts afterward. I mean, that just seems so weird to me, man.
I know. Not very cool. But yeah, I guess it's got to be tough really on both ends. He's the new guy, right? Coming into a well-established metal band. And then for them, he's the new guy, and it's basically like, well, he's never going to be Cliff.
Yeah.
I'm sure whether it was intentional or not, there was some of that there. How could there not be?
Yeah. Well, I feel like I read somewhere that he had actually recorded with them or performed. He had done something with the band maybe previously on some other tracks or so. I don't know what it was before this album. Like there was, again, I don't know where I read that. That's just really off the cuff coming into my head at the moment. But I feel like there was some sort of a previous relationship. I don't know. I don't know what it was exactly. But anyways, so yeah, they basically didn't include him in the sessions per se. And then when they were recording or mixing the album, Lars, I don't think Rasmussen did like an initial mix of it, but I think he was kind of then taken away from the part. But basically Lars and Hetfield told him to take the bass down so you could just barely hear it. And then once you can barely hear it, take it down another 3 decibels. Like, dude.
At that point, just hit the mute button on the board for that track because there's nothing left.
Yeah.
Which, is too bad. And I think there was some criticism over the album because of that. And I don't know if the music critics knew that the bass wasn't there or just that they felt that the sound was kind of dry and maybe lacking something. And in subsequent years after all that, you can find a video on YouTube that's worth watching called "And Justice for Jason," and it is "And Justice for All" with the bass tracks included.
Yeah, and if I can find that link, I'll put the link down in the description for everyone watching on YouTube, so you can check that out. But so I haven't listened to that. No, you have listened to that. Is that right?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I liked it, right? Of course, I liked it. But at the same point, I had listened to the album in its original or, in the format that we knew for so many years. I mean, since I was like in 5th or 6th grade, that it was a little different to me to hear it that way. But I liked it because there was that missing part was there. But then I almost felt like, let's see, maybe they turned the bass up in this mix like a little too much to kind of overcompensate for all those years and the fact that when they remastered it in whatever year was it, 2016 or 19,
2019,
they still didn't do it. They still didn't put them in.
Yeah, they could have done it during the remaster and they didn't put. Well, it's interesting to hear you say that because it's one of those things when I watch movies, and I know we were kind of joking around about Apocalypse Now and the Redux. When you see like a movie and they're like, oh, it's they add in scenes or they change scenes a little bit, and it's like, wait a minute, I've been watching this movie for 10, 15, 20 years, and all of a sudden there's something different. Sometimes it really, really bothers me.
Yeah.
But would you say that wasn't, it sounded different to you, but that wasn't you weren't turned off by it, I guess.
Yeah, well, I was in no way turned off by it, but just for reference, I mean, like you said, we'll link it to the video, but as you type in "And Justice" in YouTube search, "And Justice for Jason" is the 3rd search term that comes up under that, and then when you click on it, not only can you listen to that in several different forms, it looks like there might even be a couple different versions of it, but there's also something that I wish I would have listened to before, but I will now. But that there's an interview where Jason Newsted kind of reflects on that album, and I think that would be an interesting bit to listen to. So,
sweet. Well, maybe we'll link that as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's very cool, because even so, Rasmussen, he wasn't even the one who mixed the album. And I know we talked a little bit about, he kind of said it had like a compressed sound, but even before we get into maybe the compressed sound a little bit, which you touched on, he had heard the kind of the mix and what Newstead did. Toby Wright, I guess, was the assistant engineer who had worked exclusively and recorded with Newstead. They thought his parts were amazing. They thought they were really brilliant. So, it's kind of frustrating that even after all these years, they couldn't just release sort of like a remixed version with the bass in there. But,
it's almost like after all those years, you still couldn't admit that you were wrong.
Yeah,
you couldn't just be like, sorry, man, I fucked up. Here's the right one.
Exactly. But yeah, one of the things Rasmussen did say is he when he listened to the final mix, he assumed that kind of they only used the close microphones, and instead when he was recording, he kind of had room microphones, I think, to get bigger tone common sound. Yeah. And he said the percussion sounded synthetic to him, and basically he felt that was one of the reasons that the album kind of had a compressed sound a little bit.
And you can definitely hear that. I mean, especially in the drums, I think more than anything, because, a lot of times if you're going to mic a drum set for recording, you're going to mic the individual drums. And then on top of that, you're going to have mics like room mics, right? A lot of times people will put them up in a pattern behind the drummer so that you could hear it as you were the drummer, right? Like, that makes sense. The snares over here, the hi-hats over, what I mean? Or, wherever. But it sounds like they did very little of that in the final mix. I mean, they must have had used them very sparsely to get the cymbals in there. But I mean, the kick drums sound very much like they were only on the beater side of it. Just the way it is interesting, and I think that call is right on. I mean, everything sounds like not a lot of reverb,
Sure.
Not a lot of reverb.
All right.
They weren't going for that like 60s echo chamber sound at all.
No. And if they were, they did not get it.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know we just talked a lot about the recording, and maybe we had some criticism for it. Even having said that, though, I love this album. I hadn't spent a lot of time with it, and I'll fully admit, when you wanted to do this one, I was like, oh, okay. So I listened to it once or twice, and I was about to message you and be like, dude, I don't know if I can do this one. I'm not feeling it. And then I got up one morning, and I was messing around on my computer doing some photo stuff, and I just put it on. And I found myself, it just something clicked, man. And I got in the groove, and now I put it on. I'm like, wow, okay. Like there is something, again, the groove, but it has a lot of melodic tones at times with the transitions that I find myself really I find it really pleasing, and I don't find it, even though it's metal and I'm not a huge metal fan, it's not off-putting to me at all.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, for a lot of metal, they do kind of, Hetfield's delivery can be kind of growly and a bit like he's yelling at times.
Sure.
But not as bad again as, say, like a Cannibal Corpse. Right? I mean, he's got a little more tonality than that. And dude, the riffs are just so good. They're just some awesome fucking riffs on this album.
Yeah, they are. They're really, really cool. Well, so it came out, and a lot of critics liked it. They thought it was very progressive, and there's a part of me that is actually curious as to what the fans who had followed them over their previous work maybe thought of this album, because we've seen it many times where bands kind of start maybe veering in a different direction, and it maybe is seemed to be progressive. A lot of times the original fans, they think it's like selling out or watered down, and then they're putting out like a video on MTV. And to me, I think it's amazing, but I'm just curious as to maybe what some of the fans thought at the time. I mean, it certainly didn't stop them from buying the album because it sold
Yeah,
like
it
millions
sold
of
well.
copies. And it
what
was,
did
I
they
think,
say? It's like overall certified like 8 times platinum or something.
yeah, something like that. Dude,
It's really a
yeah.
really high number.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it peaked at number 6 on the Billboard 200. It was on the charts for 83 weeks, and
Wow.
it sold over 8 million copies in the U.S. since 1991. So this came out in
wow.
88. So that's not even tracking. I don't know how
Like
all
the
that stuff
first
gets
3 years of
tracked,
it.
but basically the first 3 years. Yeah, dude. So
Wow.
So I'm guessing maybe I just answered my own question. If they maybe the fans didn't mind them evolving.
I only got into it from like the older kids on the back of the bus. So for the proper shout out for the album, shout out to Mark Chandonette, if you remember that dude. He sat in the back of the bus, and he was the older kid who got me into Metallica. So I appreciate that, Mark. Still listen to this all the time because it's awesome music.
Yeah.
But I mean, people that I knew that liked Metallica, I mean, you had this album. Like it wasn't like everything else was good and this was the shit album that they put out. I mean, this was like one of the top tier.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it goes back to where they were at too as a band. It's kind of almost like a triumphant return coming out of a dark place.
Yeah, I mean the
subject matter is really awesome. We'll get into that, but.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is definitely it's a political album. It's an anti-war album, which in 1988, I guess we're post Cold War at that time, pre Desert Storm-ish, right? I don't know what was going on, but it spoke a lot to the political rebellious. Going against kind of society and societal norms, and it's funny because having listened to this album and listening to the words, reading the words, a lot of these things are still very applicable today.
Oh, absolutely! It's as applicable today. Yeah, as it ever was. I mean, it's about like the disenfranchised, racism. I mean, it's all there. But I guess with that, we might as well kind of just go into the songs because that'll really get to all these
definitely
items.
Yeah, we should.
So you start out with Blackened.
We do.
It's a pretty dark song. I feel like it's basically just like an overview of society, is basically saying this is kind of where we're at. It's not great.
Yeah. Yeah. When your first song is called Blackened, I mean, but I think this is a good song to start the album with. And it just like kind of the intro, the guitar kind of, it fades in. And then all of a sudden,
I think
it just has
reverse too.
Oh, okay. Is that what it is?
I think it
does have a weird
like
sound.
Yeah, but it's really cool. Anyways, go on.
Yeah. And then it just has this really just kind of I guess I would say like a sharp cut to Lars's drum riff, which this album does many times and is I don't know, to me is kind of a staple. And I know I mentioned earlier that some of the transitions aren't always the smoothest,
but this one's sweet.
This one's great. Yeah, it is. It is. And then then the guitar kind of comes in and attacks. And there's definitely times I find in this album, and I think it's in this song too, where the drums and guitar kind of they get in that same rhythm together and they kind of mimic each other and they really go and just it just kind of they get moving. I just think it's a great song to really start the album with, and it's got I think about 2/3 of the way through the song, it's got that kind of 80s guitar solo where it's kind of whiny. It has that little whiny feel and stuff. But man, he just shreds it too. Like, and that's it's just that sound that you don't find in kind of any other era, really.
Yep, I would agree. And again, lyrically, really dark. I mean, kind of talks about the destruction of the environment as well, but the
kind of ahead of its time a little bit too.
The one line that always really struck me was where he says, "See a mother put to death, see a mother die." I remember hearing that as a kid, and I'm like, Jesus, man, what the hell?
Be like, I'm glad I'm not playing this too loud in my room. I'm
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. You save that one for the back of the bus.
Yep, dude, you have to.
Yeah, definitely. Well, then we move on to the second song, which is the self-titled track, and that is and Justice for All. It starts with a very kind of clean guitar sound, and for me, not being what I would call like a metalhead, it's really just kind of pleasant and elegant, and I feel they try to do that in multiple songs. I feel like maybe they don't always pull it off in all the songs, but I can appreciate really kind of what they're trying to go for. So
yeah, and it's kind of cool though how then the heavy guitar really just it'll come in for a minute and then goes right back. You know what I mean? They kind of slowly get to it, and I really like when they're getting into it. And it's like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and before they're they really it's kind of cool.
And this is pretty much, I mean, I don't want to say that, I mean, this, says 9 minutes, 46 seconds, to live is to die, 9 minutes, 40. I mean, but a metal song just under 10 minutes, man, it's pretty, I don't know, ambitious, but it's.
So yeah, another thing too is for the song of that length, it's not as if it's totally instrumental. I mean, I would say the majority of it has lyrics in it. It's just you have a kind of the instrumental section in the beginning, and then there is a solo. And one thing I did forget to mention last time that I really wanted to was how when they end that solo and everything cuts out, and man, that guitar, it just sounds like it's puking. I mean, it's amazing how it just it's awesome.
Yeah, that's I had that kind of in my notes as well. Like after that solo, it picks up with it just like this distorted, like electrified riff. I mean, it's crazy, dude. Yeah,
it's really awesome song. And I think going back to the lyrics, I mean, justice is lost, justice is raped, justice is done. I mean, with everything going on now in our society, I feel like the song is more relevant than ever. And it's like sticking up for those who are oppressed.
Yeah, I think so, which is something we all need to do. Side note.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just interesting for a metal band, because I don't think that a lot of people would equate those two, but I think they did a great job of making this political statement and basically showing this huge equality gap in society.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think for you, I mean, definitely, I'm sure your favorite lyrics are probably when he says, find it so grim, find it so true, so true, so real, right? I mean,
dude, I never thought I'd get a shout out, especially by Metallica.
Metallica, yeah. So, if you do nothing else in your life, you still accomplish something.
Yeah, and they are pretty grim.
Very grim, very grim. Your brother's grim.
So then you got Eye of the Beholder, which I think is a great song to follow up with, not only musically, but lyrically too, because that to me is kind of talking about the illusion of freedom.
Sure.
You can do things your own way if it's done just how I say. And I don't know, I've always found those to be really good lyrics in that song.
Totally. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the lyrics. This is one of the songs that stands out to me that kind of has some sharp transitions that I don't think are always maybe quite the smoothest. But because it is kind of metal in their genre, I feel like they can get away with it, and I give them a little leeway there. But the lyrics that really stand out for me in this song is, freedom of choice is made for you, my friend. Freedom of speech is words that they will bend. And I find that is done so much, especially in today's media, where, you can say, a million really great things, but they will rip everything apart, and they will just pick on like these little words or what you didn't say, and it's just like, man, it's like, wait, but I do have freedom of speech, right? So can I say it my way? Is that okay?
Well, yeah. And
it's just,
what's the other one?
the talking head shows where you know,
Yeah.
they just need to fill time with bullshit. So
What do you see? What I see? Truth is an offense. I mean, that's. I don't know. It's like it's alarmingly relevant.
yeah.
You know, and really one of my favorite songs on the album. I mean, those first three. It's hard to mess with an album coming in with those first three.
Sure. Yeah.
So
yeah, it definitely is.
Really
Yeah.
kicks you in tender places.
Tender, very tender. So then we move on to probably, I mean, at least for me, I know this wasn't the first single on the album. I believe it was the third single, but it is the music video, and that's the song One. For me, this is the song that I always kind of knew of. So, and maybe it was because of the video, but I feel like it's for your average listener who isn't overly into metal. This is definitely a song you could play for someone where they would be like, oh, okay, I can dig this. You know, I can get this. It has a lot of melodic tones to it, and it's I don't want to say, I hate always being like song, you know, like we were talking about Mr. Bungle. Well, these are songs, but it has, it's like, yeah, it's a radio friendly unit shifter, right? I mean, it's really recognizable. I mean, hell, even people who play guitar, but you know, really don't, they learn that riff, that like intro riff to One. I mean, it's just, it's one of those like across the board kind of timeless things, whether you like metal or not. But and we touched a lot on the song when talking about the video, so no need to revisit that. But it is a really dark song content wise, and again, so then there's your anti-war song, right? Yeah, and I think one of the things that I do like about it, just from a musical perspective, it is more of what I would call like goes into a rock direction. I know, you know, at least in my book, metal and rock, I mean, there's a little bit of a difference there. It has a catchy melody, and there's even like some acoustic, it sounds like, in there where it's doubling the guitar at parts, and just it just has that, at least for me, that pleasant sound. So
yeah, definitely. But it does get pretty damn metal once you get into that.
It does.
You know, like that. And there's what you're talking about, where the drums and the guitar are just like they're one. You know,
yeah, they're one. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
So then we move on to not the longest, but the shortest straw. And again, I think this song starts with the drum and the guitar kind of doubling their rhythm and their sound together, and it kind of gets things going. And you know, I do like a lot of the words to this this song, and it's interesting because from what I read, Hetfield wrote just a lot of he didn't have like any of this stuff done really before they went to the studio. He wrote a lot of this, I think, while they were just recording. But some of the
that's amazing.
Some of the words, like shortest straw has been pulled for you.
That's
I like that, because it's like, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, you said it, because, and I think you said this before, where it's not that you pulled the shortest straw, you know?
Yeah. No, someone else did it for you.
Yeah.
And you don't have a chance.
Yeah.
Like,
there you go.
Sorry, this is it. And again, very relevant to the times we are living in today.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So,
unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that choice, and it's too bad, but it's a very interesting and maybe thoughtful is the wrong word, but interesting and thoughtful way to kind of talk about that, I guess.
Well, it definitely sheds light on it, and something that maybe again certain people of privilege don't always consider and think about, because the straw that was pulled for them was definitely not the shortest, right?
Yeah, sure.
And yeah, other lyrics, I don't have them in front of me, but generally, you know, what he does talk about is standing up for yourself, challenging liberty. And I think that's definitely important to continue to do. So then we go on to the sixth song, which is a Harvester of Sorrow. And I'm not sure, is this the shortest? Yeah. So this is the shortest song on the album at 5 minutes and 45 seconds. So find that kind of interesting. But Yeah, I really like, it's got a great guitar sound just to kind of open the track. It's harsh. And for me, I always find, and I think maybe I said this last time, I found myself when I was listening to it, there's something about it where I just I start rocking back and forth in my chair.
I can see that.
The way the groove goes, like, I think I probably wouldn't rock my kid if I had one that I know of to sleep to it, but I definitely, I find myself just kind of do it when I'm listening to the track.
Yeah, it is almost soothing. No, but I know what you mean. It just has that feel.
Yeah, I mean,
it really does.
You could play it in a spa.
Yeah. Oh, shoot, definitely. Right in between Anya cuts. But the thing is, I don't really know necessarily the significance, but this whole album seems to go in this progression where it's kind of an overview of where society has gotten to. Then you're talking about the justice system. Then you're talking about the illusion of freedom. Freedom no longer frees you, the dude. And then, the shortest straw. And this is almost like there's some bigger hand in everything that is like the harvester of sorrow. And it just sort of guides this ugliness in a way. I don't know if that sounds relevant or weird, but I could never figure out who or what the harvester of sorrow is or is symbolic of.
Right. Well, it's interesting because one thing we didn't talk about this time was the cover of the album, and you just said the word, freedom no longer frees you. And
best line in Eye of the Beholder, dude.
Yeah, and when you look at the cover of the album, and it's the the
Lady Justice,
Lady Justice, basically tied down with ropes, and she's got the scales of justice, and she's kind of holding them
full of money.
Yeah, they're kind of cracked and broken and falling, and she's got obviously got a blindfold on, but with with the sword and everything, and it's just being tied down. It's kind of like you're free, but you're not that free. So
yeah. But so maybe the system's the harvester of sorrow. Anyways,
that could be it. There's a lot.
So then you start going crazy after all these things, and you get to the frayed ends of sanity.
Dude, the Wizard of Oz song.
Yeah. Oh yeah, with that OEO. I always found that a little weird, but I like the rest of the song a lot.
Mm-hmm. I do find it a little. I am curious as to what their thought process was behind, like, hey, we should totally just do this and put this in the song, like where they were just like watching the Wizard of Oz one night and like, hey,
well, either that or you felt like by this time you felt like you were just one of the who did the OEO?
Well, it was like the witches kind of soldiers, basically.
Yeah, maybe you just feel like you're just one of them at that point.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, you could.
But it's interesting because this really explores like the degradation of like your mental state and
pretty much it's very
growing
dark.
Conspiracy. Everyone's after me, and I don't know.
Paranoia, man. Paranoia.
Yes.
Yeah. Paranoid android. Yeah, it does. I mean, fighting the fear, growing conspiracy. Myself is after me. Frayed ends of sanity. Hear them calling me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty dark.
Yeah. You probably need to go talk to someone.
And at that point, you probably didn't, because now you're at the point where you think that To Live Is to Die, which is track 8, instrumental.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this one, it starts with an acoustic. It kind of fades in, and I don't mind the acoustic. I like it, and I think you mentioned last time that they had kind of. I think for me it's a good contrast, and they had maybe done this before a little bit in previous albums.
They did, and actually Cliff Burton has a writing credit on this one.
Okay.
Because this was very indicative of some stuff that they did do on Ride the Lightning, and Master of Puppets has tracks that are similar in feel.
Okay. One thing that I think maybe I didn't love about it is the way it starts off with the acoustic, and then it kind of crossfades into the more, I guess, what you call the metal part.
Understood.
And I just feel like they could have done some kind of, I just don't like the crossfade. I feel like they could have done something a little more creative, music wise, in kind of transitioning into that. I don't know what you would have done or how you would have done it, but you're Metallica, figure it out. So
yeah, no, that's fair.
You know,
And it's is this the longest one? I mean,
by 2 seconds. According to Apple Music.
Well, anyways, then you go into Dyer's Eve, and Dyer's Eve is also pretty dark. It's basically like a suicide note, because I think the first lyric is like, "Dear mother, dear father," and then it just goes into how bad life is. And
yeah, well, you may remember last time I called this kind of like my Jack Horner track. You know, this is the one we're going to leave you with. This is the one we're going to leave you with. We want you to remember us by. Yeah. So, and the
lyrics kind of go with that. This is the one I want.
Well, just exactly. Well, I think it is perfect. The way Blackened, I think, is a great song to start the album. I think this is a good song to end the album.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Because I feel like it kind of sums everything up a little bit. It has, I think, the lyrical theme, I think, is very similar to the shortest straw. So, it seems to be, again, about oppression, being held down. And
you just can't do it anymore, dude.
Yeah. And then music wise, though, it does it. I just feel like it kind of encompasses everything that we've been listening to for pretty much, about the previous hour or so.
Fair point. That is a really fair point. I would agree with you on that. And I've always liked it musically, but very dark.
Very dark.
But in light of that, I mean, now it's time to get out your razor blade, screwdriver, implement of scratching destruction, and play the game, dude.
Today I got like these little scissors. That are in my.
Yeah, I actually have a Pilot G2 pen, which I think, given the right, I think that would do it.
I'm more of a Bic fan myself, but that's whatever. Pick your weapon of choice.
Bic doesn't have shit on the Pilot G2. Just
dude, it's long lasting.
I'll send you one.
Smooth.
I'll send you one.
Please do. All right. Anyways, all right. Wait. So am I scratching first? You scratching first?
Yeah, go ahead. I'd like to hear it as someone who's I guess newer to the album, maybe.
Yeah, totally. So I am gonna go with the instrumental song, which is "To Live Is to Die." And I like the feeling of the whole album. I like all the songs. Again, I've said I think a few times you can kind of get lost in the album, and that's really cool to me, especially for what I would consider a metal album. But the biggest thing that stands out, or maybe takes me out of the album, is that acoustic sound. I get what they were going for, but that beginning acoustic and the ending acoustic, I don't like the crossfade. I really wish they would have done something a little more creative there than just doing that crossfade from the acoustic into the metal. So when push comes to shove, that's the one I have to go with.
Well, that's interesting. So we find ourselves in what the scholars would refer to as a little bit of a shit pickle, because that is exactly what I would have chosen, and for very similar reason. To me, it's really long and it just kind of drags. Yeah, for me. Yeah. So
we're going to overtime.
Overtime, yeah. All right. So now we're in overtime.
Yes. Does that mean I go again and pick mine, or do you go again? I forget.
I don't know. Is it like ping pong with game point?
Dude, you want to go same time?
Yes. All right.
Okay. All right. So 1, 2, 3, and then say it.
And it can't be "To Live Is to Die."
Right.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Dyer's Eve.
Dyer's Eve. Oh.
We can't go into double OT.
I can't believe I scratched the Jack Horner track too. I feel like I kind of sold out just because it's the Jack Horner track.
I know, but to me, it's like if the album ended with "Frayed Ends of Sanity," that also wouldn't be terrible.
Yeah, and I would say this too, as from a consumer, like those last 2 songs, however they are lengthy, I wouldn't feel like, oh my gosh, this album was only 7 songs.
It's too short.
It's too short, because every song is over 5.5 minutes, some of them reaching 6, 7, almost 10 minutes. So you wouldn't feel like you were shortened as kind of a consumer. So Yeah,
And I think we just
agree.
got to call this one.
Yeah.
This
agree.
isn't the playoffs, and you can still have a tie.
Playoffs.
I just don't know if we can just keep doing double and triple OT.
No, because
Like that one Islanders Capitals game. Isn't that who
they
it
went
was?
they went to like 4.
Yeah, we're not going to be doing this till 2 a.m. So
No, the Islanders win the series and the game. So, oh man, good old days. So, well, I think that pretty much wraps up. Hopefully, all our technical stuff worked out. Although we had a little drop out in the middle, but we will fix that. We promise.
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
And we're gonna actually do what I just criticized Metallica for doing. We're gonna do a crossfade. That's what we're gonna do.
dude, that's so beautiful.
It pretty much is. So you won't even notice, guys. You won't even notice. Maybe on the video if you look real closely. So, well, I think that pretty much wraps it up there, Slim Grim. What do
Yeah.
you say? Cool.
Yeah, until
Cool.
next time.
Until next time, guys, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, give us 5 stars, whatever app you're on, whatever social media you're on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell people you don't like. It's fine. We don't mind. We need more subscribers, and we're gonna keep rocking and rolling. So let's just keep going. So until next time,
Scratch you
catch
later.
you later.
Scratch Your Track is produced by the Dude and Grim. Additional music provided by More. That's ... MORE and the Tims TIMNZ. Copyright 2020. The Dude and Grim Show.